Hey friends, welcome back to my kitchen. Today I'm going to be making tomato soup using the Mrs. Wages packets that I picked up the other day. And you can see here they weren't very much. I actually paid $1.99 each. If you want to see how I got these, I'll post a link up here in the corner of my grocery haul where I went to the Amish salvage store. But yeah, so while I was out that day, I also got some tomatoes. So I decided I'm going to use up these Mrs. Wages packets and use up the tomatoes as well. This particular Mrs. Wages packet calls for 3.5 pounds of tomatoes per packet. I'm doing a double batch. So I used 7 pounds of fresh tomatoes and I went ahead and I blanched them and I peeled them and cored them off screen. If you want to know how to do that, it's really simple. You just you put a little X in the bottom of your tomato, throw it in some boiling water for a minute or two until the skin starts to peel off. Put it in an ice bath and then peel them and use a knife to remove the core. So I'm just going to blend these up. The recipe calls for these to be pureed in a blender. The great part about Miss Wages packets, in my opinion, is that you can also use canned tomato puree. So keep that in mind if you're picking these up. Read the instructions on the back. A lot of them have alternative instructions if you don't have fresh tomatoes or fresh vegetables for you to use other resources, canned tomatoes, etc. Now, if you have a high-powered blender, it's going to blend these tomatoes down to where you don't even have any seeds. And if you have a cruddy little Amazon special like I do, you're still going to have seeds left over. The blender's just not powerful enough to pulverize the seeds. If the seeds bother you in your canned goods, you can run this through a sieve to catch, the excess tomato seeds. It doesn't bother me that much, so I just left them. But if that's a texture issue for you, go ahead and run them through a sieve. The doubled recipe says that I should have had about 14 cups of pureed tomato, and I had exactly 14 cups of pureed tomato with 7 pounds of tomatoes. So I'm just going to go ahead and add all of my tomato puree to a heavy bottom pot, not an aluminum pan. You don't want to use a reactive pan. And to that, I'm adding 13 cups of water. And I'm going to add my little Mrs. Wages packets, and that is it. So easy. Mrs. Wages packets, I just discovered these last year, and for some things, they really are nice. Soup, salsa, pickles, they have so many different varieties of things. Chili starter, and they're simple to make, they go really fast, and it's nice for when you don't have an entire day to sit and process stuff. I don't use these packets exclusively, but I do think that it might be a good tool for those of you who are just learning how to can and you're still learning the principles of canning and you just need something simple instead of a big complicated recipe. So you're going to bring this soup up to a boil and then you're going to turn it back a little bit to a simmer and let it simmer for 10 minutes. I have my jars getting hot in my water bath canner, and after that has simmered for 10 minutes, we're going to go ahead and get it jarred up. I'm just going to show you a couple of jars, but I will link a playlist up here at the top if you need more detailed canning instructions, like if you're a beginner canner and you want to know step by step how to can things. I'll put that up in the upper right hand corner. So I'm just going to go ahead and fill my jars to a 1/2 inch headspace. The soup smells delicious, by the way. I did taste it. It's wonderful. This doesn't have, like the whole thickening agent and dairy in it. So what I'll do is when I'm ready to serve this soup, I will pull it out, put it on the stove, heat it up a little bit, and then add some heavy cream, maybe a few more seasonings to it, some salt, some pepper to taste, maybe a little more garlic powder, and it'll be a delicious soup. It'll go really nicely with a grilled cheese sandwich on a night that I don't feel like doing a ton for dinner. So once we debubble our jar, I'm going to take a clean paper towel and wipe the top of the jar off with some white vinegar. And this did get all over the tops of the jars, so this is a very important step. Don't skip it or your jars might not seal properly. I'm going to get my lid on and I'm going to put my ring on just to finger tight, and then I'll get this jar back into the canner. I'll do a couple more jars for you on camera, and then I go ahead and I do the rest off camera. Now, an individual packet of Mrs. Wages says that this soup mix will make 6 pints per package. I did a double batch, and I ended up getting 9 jars canned, and then 3 more additional pints for the freezer. I ran out of pint jars, so it was perfect. That was exactly what the recipe said it would make. In fact, on the back of the package was pretty spot on as far as how many pounds of tomatoes, how many cups of tomatoes, and how many pints you would end up with as far as the finished product. Saying I had 3 additional pints to go into the freezer, and since I ran out of pint jars, for some reason the stores where I live, pint jars the only thing I can't find. Everything else, down to even the little 4-ounce jars, I can find all of those, but I cannot find pint jars. So what I did was I had some professional grade, like BPA-free plastic bowls like they use in, restaurants. So I just put a pint of the soup in each one of the bowls. I didn't fill it all the way to the top, and I labeled them, and I allowed them to cool to kind of room temperature before I stuck them into my freezer. And, that's something that one of my kids can just throw in the microwave and heat up if they don't want to use the stovetop. So we do enjoy having quick, easy things laying around for the days where maybe someone's not feeling good and we need some quick soup, or maybe mom's not feeling up to cooking dinner. Something that, other people in the house can just help themselves to, and they don't really need any supervision in the kitchen. Now, the preparation on this took all of about maybe 15 or 20 minutes. It took me longer to peel my tomatoes than it took to process the soup. But once we get all of these jars into the water bath canner, this recipe says that it does need to water bath can for 40 minutes for altitudes less than 1,000 feet. Mrs. Wage's website does have a chart that you can consult if you live above 1,000 feet. But yeah, 40 minutes at a rolling boil. So I'll get those in there. I'll get the heat turned up and the lid on. And once it comes up to a rolling boil, I'll set my timer for 40 minutes. And when it's done, I turn the heat off and crack the lid for 10 minutes, and then I go ahead and remove my jars. And there's the 3 bowls of soup that I had to go into the freezer. Worked out perfectly. My canner was full. Maybe it was a small blessing that I didn't have pint jars. Who knows? And as I was removing all of my jars, they immediately started to pop. I don't know if you'll be able to hear it in the video or not, but I let these jars sit out for 24 hours. They all sealed. They all sealed rather quickly, actually. So I washed all my jars off, and I labeled them tomato soup with the date. And I loaded these jars into my pantry, and I'm pretty happy to have 9 jars of a quick lunch or quick dinner on the shelves. And don't forget that in a pinch, tomato soup is also a good starter for other things. Vegetable soup, spaghetti sauce, chili. I mean, if you put this in some goulash and use that as your starter, it would be delicious because this has garlic and seasonings and all sorts of stuff in it. So it doesn't just have to be tomato soup. You can use it for other things too. I really hope that if you haven't tried any Mrs. Wage's recipes that you give them a shot. Pick one, pick something simple and give it a shot and see if you like it. Just most of these recipes are small batches anyway, so if you don't like it, you're not out that much. But that's all I have for you guys this week. If you're new here, hi, my name is Jen. I do cooking, canning, and food preservation videos every Tuesday, and then I do garden vlogs every Friday. If you're into that sort of content, I hope you'll consider subscribing and sticking around. We have a really great group of people here, and we'd love to have you. Until next time, friends, happy cooking.